Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grandmaster Alexander Ipatov, and welcome to the chessworld.com video series. In this video, I would like to give an insight into the rook endings. We will examine the positions which a player of any level has to know by heart, as well as take a look at some practical endgames. So let me start with the Philidor position, maybe the most known position in the rook endgames. So so Philidor position arises when the strongest side has an extra pawn, and the idea of the strongest side is to bring the pawn to e6, then to play king d6 and simply mate the black king on the 8th rank, or if it doesn't happen, then just to promote the pawn into the queen. So the black's only defending method is to put the rook on the 6th rank and therefore prevent the further invasion of the white king to the 6th rank. So in this position we play rook h1, rook h6, preventing the both mentioned plan. Okay, let's say white plays e5, aiming to play e6, and then king d6, and then rook a8 mate. So here we just make some random waiting move. Let's say rook g6. And rook b6 is also possible. So rook g6, a waiting move, keeping the rook on the 6th rank until the pawn advances to e6. Well, except playing the e5, e6, white can hardly find any other ideas. So let's see, e6. So white already has the threat to play king d6 and rook a8 mate. So here black has to play rook g1, activating the rook, and when the white king advances to d6, the rook starts checking from behind. So, and the white king cannot escape from checks. King e5, rook e1 check, king f6. Once again with the idea rook e8 mate, but once again black checks, rook f1, king e5, rook e1, king f5, rook f1, king g4, rook g1, king f3, and when the white king is too far away from the pawn, the black rook comes back to e1 and starts attacking the e6 pawn. So the pawn cannot be any more protected by the king because it's simply too far away. So let's say rook a6, but then simply king e7, and on the next move black takes the pawn back and makes an easy draw. So once again, this is the position known as a Philidor position, and so the strongest side wants to play e5, e6, king d6, rook a mate, and the black's defending method is to put the rook on the 6th rank and wait there until white advances the pawn to e6. And after it happens, black activates the rook and starts checking from behind once the white king reaches the 6th rank, king d6, rook d1. It's also worth mentioning that black cannot play rook h1 here before the white pawn reached the 6th rank, because then white wins after playing king d6, and here black has two moves, if rook h6 then e6, and we can see that the rook is standing on the wrong place. It should have been on h1 to start checking with rook d1, but on h6 it's not possible, so black loses here. So okay, another move is rook d1 here, but the problem is that white has a e6 square here, which is still available because the pawn is still on e5. So after rook d1, white plays king e6, and once again black cannot check the white king, while the white threat is very simple to play rook e8, and this is another winning position. Alright, so that was the fielder position, and let's go into another one. Okay, the second position is known as the Lucena position. In this case, the king of the weaker side is separated from the pawn by one or more files. And as early as 1497, the Spaniard Lucena demonstrated the method to win here. So, white already advanced the pawn to the 7th rank, but the white's only problem is how to get out with the king from g8 and advance the pawn into the queen. So let's say black just waits with rook h3, covering the h7 square. And okay, here white has two ways to win. The first one is to cut off the black king from e-file, rook e1, king d7, rook e4. But it's also possible to play rook f4 directly. White aims to build the bridge and prepare the king f7, king g6, then king g5 and rook g4, hiding from checks. So okay, black has to wait with rook h1. Then we play rook e4 here. It was also possible to play rook e1 check and then rook e4. There is no difference. So once again, white constructs the so-called bridge, a coordinating method between the rook and the ready-to-emerge king. But in order for the bridge to be effective, the opponent's king must be thrown back one more file. So rook e4 check, king d7 and king f7. Now white is threatening to promote the queen with g7, g8. So black has to do something right away. So rook f1 check, king g6. Once again, the threat is to play g8. So once again, black has no choice, so has to play rook g1 check, then king f6. Okay, now there is no threat to play g8 because it's covered from the rook, but the white threat, if it's him to move, it's to play rook e5 and rook g5, and then g8. So let's say rook g2, then rook e5, and rook g5. If black plays king d6, then first check, throwing the black king more far away from the pawn, and then rook d8 and g8. And rook f1, king e3, check, and king f2, and the pawn advances. So in this position, check, check, king f6, okay, one more check, king g5, rook g1 check, and rook g4. And we can see the bridge which white managed to build successfully. There are no more checks from the black side. Also, he cannot exchange the rooks because rook g4, king takes g4, and king e7 fails to stop the pawn because the black king is one file away from the pawn. So g8, queen wins. So once again, that was the Lucena position, and where the winning method for the strongest side is to build the so-called bridge. It means to bring the rook to f4, then to throw the opponent's king to one file away from the pawn, and then start moving the king away from g8, and therefore liberating the g8 square for promoting the pawn. So the weakest side starts checking, but then the king of the strongest side reaches the 5th rank, and after the rook g1 check, rook g4 wins. So once again, rook f4, rook h1, check, king d7, king f7, g8 is a threat, check, king g6, rook g1, check, and rook g4. And there are no more checks and the pawn wins. Okay, alright, so let's check the other position. So it's very similar to the filter position, but if it were the black one to move, then it would be in a draw with rook a6, covering all squares of the invasion. And in case of e6, going back to a1 and start checking once the white king reaches the 6th rank. But unfortunately, it's white to move, and it wins with a move king f6. We already briefly checked this winning method in the filter position, and here, if rook a6, then simply e6, and the rook on a6 is misplaced. It should be on a1 in order to start checking with rook f1. So this is already winning. Rook b8 is a threat. If rook a8, then simply rook h7 and then rook h8, and black cannot prevent it. So rook king f6, rook f1 check, and king e6. And that is the main difference comparing to the filter position, that the e6 square is free for the king because the pawn is still on e5, and the opponent's rook has no more checks, and whatever black does here, it's lost. Well, let's say, okay, rook b8 is a threat, so let's say king d8, then simply rook b8 check, king c7, and rook h8, and white simply advances the pawn. King e7, e6, king e8, e7. And then he can implement the Lucena position, building the so-called bridge on the fourth rank, or there are some other methods to win. So once again, if it's black to move here, it's a draw. It's a failure position, but if it's white to play, it's winning because of the move king f6, rook f1, king e6. And the difference is that the pawn is on e5, and the e6 square is available for the white king. One more position to examine. We can see that white managed to advance his pawn to the 7th rank, and it's about to promote to the queen. And the winning method here is to throw the black king away to one file more, and then rook g1, king h7, and then to come back to e1 and support the promotion of the pawn. So black has a choice to check the king with rook a8, then king f7, and e8 promotes on the next move. He can also play rook d2, preventing the king d7, but then once again king f7, rook f2 check, and king e6. The black rook has no more checks, and once again the white pawn promotes into the queen. So also white could have stepped wrongly here and played king d7 directly, which would have led to a draw because the black rook is on the long side and the king is on the short side. So rook a7 check, the king, let's say king d8 with the threat of e8, then once again rook a8 check, king c7, and rook a7 check, and the king cannot escape checks, because if any move like king b6, then simply rook e7, and if king d6, then one more check, king d5, rook a5, and once the white king gets too far away from the pawn, like here, then simply rook e4, and black wins the pawn back. So it's important. So this position is important to know. It's important to remember that first the strongest side has to throw the opponent's king away for one file, and then to come back to the file on which the pawn stands. And after that, the weakest side can do whatever he wants, but the draw is not possible. Once again, let's see rook f2, then king d7, rook d2, king e6, and once again there are no more checks. Alright, so next position. This is another position which is very important to know. The king of the weakest side is already cut off on the 8th rank, and the rook of the weakest side is also passive. It has to stay on the 8th rank, because if it moves to e1, then simply rook g8 with a mate. But surprisingly enough, this is not enough to win. However, the black pieces are so passive. Let's say rook b7 check, king e8, but not king c8 because of king a7, and then rook b8 check. Let's say rook e1 check, king d7, king b7, and sooner or later we will reach the Lucena position, which we had already examined. In that position, okay, we can check it briefly again. Let's say move rook b1, rook e8, rook 2. Maybe rook. Yes, there is no difference. I mean, black simply loses rook e8, rook b2, rook a1, rook b3, king b8, king b8, king c6, sorry, king a7. Okay, if king c6 here, then simply rook c1 check and b7, like this. And yeah, here we reach the Lucena position, where the winning method is to play rook c4, then rook d4 check, and then simply to bring the king closer, and then rook b4 check. Sorry, rook b1, rook b1 check, rook b4, and there are no more checks on the pawn promotes. So the king c8 is a step in the wrong direction. So black has to wait passively by playing king a8, and white cannot make any progress. Rook a7 check, king b8. Of course, white would like to play something like b7, but it even loses to rook a6 check, king b5, king takes a7, and there are no more ideas how to win. So it's a draw. So it's very important to remember that the passive defense on the 8th rank, with both king and the rook on the 8th rank, saves the day against the b and g pawns, because the strongest side can hardly make a progress. So, but there is a difference if the strongest side has c or f pawns. So this is already winning for the strongest side. In this position, white plays king b6 with the idea to play c6, and black cannot activate his rook because of rook h8 check, king d7, and simply c6, king d6, rook d8, and white wins. So basically black has to wait passively, like in the positions with the g pawns to the strongest side, but the difference is that here the strongest side wins. Let's examine why. So c6, once again the black rook cannot move from the 8th rank because of the mate, rook h8. So let's say rook f8, rook h7. Once again, black really doesn't have a choice, so has to wait. Rook e8, and the winning method here, comparing to the positions with bg pawns, is that white wins by having one more file to check. Like this. Check and c7 check. This is the main difference between bg pawns and cf pawns. Check and white wins. So if king c8, we have once again rook a7, and if king b8, then c7 once again, and white wins. So this position is winning for the strongest side because he has more space to create his mating setup comparing to bg pawns. So king b6 with the idea to play c6, rook h7. Black has to wait passively. c6. Okay, white slowly follows his plan. Rook e8, check. First check, which is important. King c8 and rook a7. And the mate on a8 is a threat, so king b8 and then check with a tempo. King c8 and rook e8 check, and white wins. So this is an important difference between bg pawns and cf pawns. So let's examine one more position with the bg pawns for the strongest side. And so we already know that the passive defense on the 8th rank with the king on g8 or h8 and the rook on the 8th rank save the day for black, because white cannot make a progress because the pawn is too close to the corner and white doesn't have enough space to create the mating threat like it happens with cf pawns. So what is the difference between this position and the one we had already examined? So if the black king were on g8 and not on f8, then after rook f8, white cannot win because black managed to get the drawish setup. But black is missing tempo, which cannot be recovered. So after king g8 with the idea rook f8, white wins by checking, rook f8, take, and king h7. And the pawn promotes. So, as we know, chess is a very concrete game and every tempo matters. So, white wins with rook b8 with only one way to go to win, but it's enough. Alright, so let's check one more position where the weakest side has the cutoff king on the 8th rank, and where the weakest side fails to get the fielder position. So if the rook were on a1 instead of a7, then black could reach a draw very, very easily with rook f1 check, king e5, rook e1. But unfortunately it's not possible. So let's check if black has any other way to draw here. And also, as we know, chess is a strategical game with the elements of tactics. So here, one of those elements helps black to make a draw. This is rook f7 check. And white cannot grab the rook, e takes f7 because we have a stalemate, which is a draw. So if king e5, then we play rook f1 and we get the fielder position where white cannot bring the king to the 6th rank because of checks, and also he doesn't have the e6 available because the pawn is already there. So king d6, rook d1, king e5, rook e1 check. Okay, rook e4 doesn't change the result because this pawn endgame is also a draw. The black king keeps their position, 7 check, king e8, and king e6 stalemate, and it's draw. So once again, it's important to remember this tactical motive, how to make a draw. Rook f7 check, using the stalemate idea. White cannot take. On f7 then, if king e5, then rook f1, activating the rook and transposing into the failure position, where the rook is active and checks once the king of the strongest side reaches its 6th rank. King d6, rook d1.